Trash talking is a big part of why we, fans, love the NBA so much. There is no other league in the world that really comes close to the NBA in that regard. It is what makes it so entertaining. Seeing some of the best basketball players to ever play the game talking trash to each other, provoking each other, knowing very well that one of them is going to eventually come out on top, and the other one will look like a fool. Gary Payton, Kevin Garnett, Reggie Miller, or even Rasheed Wallace were some of the best trash talkers to ever do it, but even they knew that some players were absolutely off limits. Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Larry Bird were the kind of players you did not, under any circumstance, wanted to talk trash to. In today's NBA, there is one such player, a player who is already extremely dominant on a daily basis, but who also uses trash talk as a fuel to take over games and ruthlessly dominate their opponents, making sure this was the first and only time they tried to talk trash to him. His name, Luka Doncic. Luka Doncic is the one player you do not want to mess with. It doesn't matter if you are a player, a fan, a front office member, an analyst, or even a teammate. He will take his revenge somehow at some point. But the thing is, trash-talking Luka won't make him lose focus. That's usually the goal when talking trash to a player. Get in his head, take him out of the game. Well, not Luka. On the contrary, he plays with a lot of pride and will make an example out of you for trying to provoke him. And yet, despite all the evidence we are going to show you, there are always some new reckless people in the NBA landscape trying to take shots at Luka Magic, but this is not a battle they will win. So let's take a look at when trash-talking Luka Doncic went wrong. As we said, you do not have to be an NBA player to be humbled by Luka Doncic. This can happen to you too, if you are a fan daring to talk smack to Luka. In their second-round series against the OKC Thunder in the 2024 playoffs, the Dallas Mavericks and Luka Doncic had to deal with a fired-up crowd who had spent years waiting for their team to be back in the postseason. As the #1 seed, and having won the first game of the series convincingly, the OKC fans were feeling overwhelmingly optimistic and confident in their team's ability to dispose of Luka and the Mavs. Perhaps a bit too much. In Game 2, the home crowd went with the usual "Luka sucks" chant, which is fine. Every NBA superstar has had to deal with that chant. It's nothing out of the ordinary, and it even fueled the Slovenian player. Except, later on, things went too far when some Courtside fans decided to take a shot at Luka's family, something that Doncic would definitely not let slide.
There was one guy courtside going at my family. I don't like that, man. You're a grown-ass man. I just can't do that.
He had words for some of their fans during the game, but he also made sure to lead his team to a very, very important win on the road in a rather close game. Before fans started going at Doncic, the Thunder led the series 1-0 and had all the momentum in the world. Luka himself was struggling at his point. Before this happened, he had been averaging 28 points per game on 39% shooting and 22% from three so far in the playoffs. After this happened, the Dallas Mavericks won 4 out of the next 5 games, did not lose a single game in Oklahoma City, and Luka went on to be way better, averaging only 25 points, but on 48% shooting and 45% from 3, along with 12 rebounds and 9 assists per game. A true turning point for Luka Doncic, who used this disrespect as fuel to send this young OKC team home. But there is something even crazier than going at opposing players or fans, going at your own teammates. In early 2024, it was revealed by Dallas Mavericks Vice President of Basketball Operations, Michael Finley, that Luka Doncic and Grant Williams had a moment in practice. During that practice, Luka was apparently not giving his all and seemed to be rather lazy, something that Grant Williams did not appreciate, and so he decided to get under his skin in order to get him going. Williams started trash-talking him and eventually got what he wanted. Luka replied with a simple, "Okay," and went on a 26-6 run by himself. Even during practice, you should not poke the bear. A few weeks later, Grant Williams, who had been struggling to hit shots for a few months now, was traded to the Charlotte Hornets for PJ Washington, a move that completely shifted the Mavericks in a positive direction and turned their season around. Grant Williams later came out saying he did not take Luka's reaction personally and that he was trying to be a leader. However, Dallas Mavericks insider Tim McMahon later revealed that the former Celtics player rubbed people the wrong way in Dallas. Now, we cannot speculate and say that Luka called for the trade to happen, nor that it happened because of a simple practice interaction. But it goes to show that even if you are on his team, he will not spare your feelings and he will make sure that you don't do that again. Okay, but let's go back to the OKC fans incident for a second. If you think this was bad, we got another one, even more recent, that somehow ended up in an even worse fashion. After dealing with the Thunder crowd, one could believe that the other NBA fans would know better than to talk trash to Doncic, right? Well, not the Minnesota Timberwolves fans. In the Western Conference Finals of the 2024 playoffs, the Wolves also had an extremely loud crowd, given the team's historical lack of success. This was their second conference finals appearance ever. In a very hostile environment, the Wolves fans certainly did not refrain from provoking Luka. Except, Luka and the Mavs won the first 2 games of the series on the road. After Game 2, Luka made sure to address the home crowd, telling them to go home. Then, after winning Game 3 at home, the Mavs got blown out at home and could not close it out in Game 4, which meant going back to Minnesota for Game 5 and a chance at making the finals. Now, no team has ever won a series after going down 3-0, but every team that has ever been in that situation probably thought they could be the first to do it, including the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I mean, if they won this game, the pressure would be on the Mavericks, not them. They had to make their presence felt at home. And they also did not forget about Luka's comments after Game 2. However, they should have stayed quiet. One Timberwolves fan in particular apparently talked a lot of smack to Luka very early in the game, which was probably the biggest mistake of his life. I mean, we are talking about a guy who played as a teenager in some of the most hostile arenas in Europe and did not crumble. Do you think he is going to get shaken up by Minnesota's crowd? That was all Dončić needed to absolutely destroy the Wolves. In the first quarter alone, he scored 20 points, including 4 threes. Yes, he scored more points than the entire Timberwolves team in the first quarter. Then, by halftime, the Mavs were already up by nearly 30 points. The crowd was dead silent. The hopeful Minnesota fans ran out of hope very quickly. When Luka came back from the locker room, he kept scoring and scoring, asking the Wolves fans and possibly Snoop Dogg himself, who was sitting right next to them.
And look, he's having words with Snoop right now. Snoop.
With some not-so-nice words that we can't really tell here. We told you, no one is off limits when it comes to Luka. Who knows what could have happened if that Wolves fan did not motivate Luka to go absolutely crazy on his team. The only thing we know is that this was the first and only time this guy tried to go at Luka. All of this trash-talking against fans is good and all, but if there is one moment in Luka's career that sticks out when it comes to trash-talking, then it is the Devin Booker incident. Let's go back to 2022 for this one. The Phoenix Suns, fresh off a finals appearance the year prior, are the overwhelming favorites in the West. The Dallas Mavericks, who just traded Kristaps Porzingis a few weeks before, are left with Spencer Dinwiddie as Luka's co-star. So when the two teams face in the second round of the playoffs, it seems like a Phoenix win is inevitable, right? Well, after the first 2 games, yes, it seemed like it. Luka had already gotten into it with Suns fans, and you could tell there was some tension between Dončić and Booker every time they scored on each other. It also did not help that he and Chris Paul laughed when a reporter asked them a question regarding Luka after a game. But nothing out of the ordinary, yet. After Dallas took care of business at home, though, things escalated very quickly in an important Game 5 in Phoenix. The game in itself was not particularly interesting. Actually, it was not even close whatsoever. The Suns blew the Mavs out of the water in the second half and were 1 win away from going to the Western Conference Finals. What is interesting is what happened during that game. On a drive to the basket, Devin Booker got fouled and stayed on the ground for a while and eventually said, obviously mocking Luka's habit to foul hunt and flop, according to people. Sadly for Book, fans were filming him, and I do not think he meant for this to end up in Luka's ears. To make things even spicier, Luka was caught saying, and he's not wrong. It's much easier to talk trash when you are winning a game or a series at home, and very close to closing the series out. To this day, Devin Booker probably wishes that this fan were not recording him on that play, because what ensued is one of the biggest humiliations that the modern NBA has seen. Game 6 in Dallas was easily won by the Mavericks, something you would expect from a team that suffered a big loss in Game 5. The Suns still had a Game 7 at home to close out the series. They were the favorites headed into the series. They had a better team. They talked trash that needed to be backed up. The pressure was on them, except they did not even have time to think about all that. Luka Doncic ended their season within the first quarter. By halftime, he had 27 points. The Suns, as a team, had 20. Devin Booker, who had been talking all that trash, had a whopping 2 points on 0 field goals at half, and his team, at home, was down by 30 points. Luka Doncic silenced the Phoenix crowd like no one before. He ended the game with more points than Booker, more rebounds than Ayton, the same amount of assists as Chris Paul, and more steals than Bridges. Individually, he completely owned this Phoenix Suns team who thought they could get away with mocking Luka. The worst part? He did not only end their season, he ended this version of the Suns as we knew them. A few months later, Bridges was gone, and they had to bring in Kevin Durant to help them. Now it's time to talk about one of the most prominent figures of trash talking in the NBA, Dillon Brooks. Love him or hate him, you have to admit he is really good at entertaining us. Everyone remembers him going at LeBron and the Lakers in the 2023 playoffs. It did not end up well for him, but he was already used to it at this point. A few months prior, before facing the Mavericks, Dillon Brooks commented on the Slovenian point guard being out, claiming that sometimes people just are not ready for the physical games. Dillon really needs to choose his targets better, a comment which Luka Doncic probably still had in mind a year later when he decided to give the Houston Rockets wing a free dancing lesson on this nasty move.
Into the day with 7, now he's got 8.
But that is not at all. We have also seen him make fun of Brooks's offense, yelling "hell no" in his face after a one-on-one situation where he missed a layup on Luka. Just a nice way to tell him that this is not his kind of shots and that he should stick to catch-and-shoot stuff. But in the end, this is lighthearted trash talk more than anything. The two have had a lot of praise for each other. Luka claiming he enjoys facing competitors like Brooks, who claimed that Luka was definitely one of the hardest players he has ever had to guard. And after all, this is probably the best version of trash talk we can have. It doesn't have to be pure hatred. Players can appreciate each other but also go at each other on the court. Now, something special. Trash talking does not always have to be someone directly talking to a player and telling him he sucks. In this case, it is not only one person trash-talking Luka, it's multiple people from multiple organizations. We are back in 2018, and front offices are deciding which player they will choose with their pick. At the time, there was some hype surrounding Luka Doncic, but not to the extent of his actual abilities. He was not even in consideration to go first overall, when now, in hindsight, he is clearly the best player from that draft. But then what happened? Well, see, a lot of analysts in America did not believe in Luka, and that is fine. At the end of the day, they are just here to talk on TV. They are not paid to actually draft players, decisions which can have dramatic effects on a franchise in the long run. Except, the people who are paid to do that also did not believe in Luka Doncic. Even worse, he was considered overrated and maxed out by the teams who did not draft him according to ESPN's Tim McMahon. The Phoenix Suns, the Sacramento Kings, the Atlanta Hawks, and the Memphis Grizzlies. All of these teams could have drafted Luka but decided not to. Some still ended up with all-star caliber players such as Trae Young or Jaren Jackson Jr. Others ended up with Marvin Bagley or DeAndre Ayton. But what did they mean by maxed out? Well, most likely that Dončić had been playing professional ball for a while overseas already. Maybe his body would not last that long in the NBA since he was not that athletic to begin with. It also meant that Luka, who was so great and polished for his age, had already hit his ceiling. Like, he would be a very good NBA player, with a great floor, the kind of player who would not disappoint you if you drafted him, but also one who would not develop that much more from what he was at the time. Whatever their reasoning was, it was wrong. Of course, Luka did not publicly come out to mock these franchises for not drafting him. However, the disrespect that they showed towards him can be regarded as some sort of front office trash talking, in a way. And if you look at it, most of these franchises have also not been doing any better than the Mavericks and Luka Doncic. Maybe they should have picked the maxed out Slovenian boy. What about the most savage example of trash talking Luka Doncic gone wrong? This one concerns Rudy, who is already one of the most disliked or even hated players in the NBA, especially by American people. Now, Rudy and Luka have seen each other a lot already, both playing in the Western Conference for their entire career. They have faced each other countless times in the regular season, but also in the postseason, where the Mavs upset the Jazz in 2022. Luka was playing exceptionally well, and Rudy, on the other hand, struggled a bit with the amount of shooters on the court. They even faced each other with their national teams multiple times. In the 2020 Olympics, Rudy and France eliminated Luka in the semi-finals, in a heartbreaking loss for the Slovenian national team. A few years later, Luka took his revenge by beating France in Eurobasket and scoring a whopping 47 points. So yeah, there is some history between them. But it is more than just facing each other a lot, eliminating each other. There is bad blood. They do not like each other. These clips are pretty self-explanatory. Luka already made it clear several times, including in the 2022 playoffs, that Rudy cannot guard him. And that is because Rudy isn't just anyone. He's a 4-time Defensive Player of the Year. He should be the best defender in the NBA, right? So Luka wants to show people that even the best can't stop him. And Luka tried to warn Rudy after he talked some more trash during the 2024 regular season.
He started talking to me in third quarter, I think, or second quarter. So when you start that, you know I'm coming back to you.
Now that you know all that, let's go back to the 2024 playoffs once again. After talking trash to the home crowd already, Luka Doncic took things to another level in Game 2. The Mavericks were up 1-0 in the series, and this game was particularly close, but also a real battle on the court. The tension was extremely high, and for some reason, Rudy decided to take a cheap shot towards Luka early in the game. Stakes were high, so sometimes you do whatever it takes to try and get in the players' heads. Going up 2-0 on the road is a huge advantage. 1-1 would mean the momentum goes back to the Wolves. Luka had been rather quiet in the fourth quarter. He had made no field goal despite playing the entire quarter, and was focused on playmaking and letting Kyrie Irving, who was on fire, do his thing. However, when the Mavericks found themselves down 2 with around 10 seconds left in the game, you knew exactly who the ball was going to: the man himself. Except, there are plenty of great defenders to guard Luka. The Wolves were the best defense the whole season for a reason. Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, even Mike Conley. And yet Minnesota opted for a switch. Or maybe that's not really what they wanted to do in the first place, but it happened anyway. Luka Doncic left on an island with Rudy, the man who had been talking trash to him for years, who he clearly does not like, and who took a cheap shot at him earlier. He had one thing in mind: make him regret all that. And boy, did he regret all that. This step-back three, as well as the trash talking that ensued, was viewed millions and millions of times within a few hours. Not only did it crush the Wolves' spirits and hopes of a finals appearance, it also served as a message directly to Rudy. Is that all you can do as a 4-time Defensive Player of the Year? Luka already told Rudy he could not guard him and that he would go back for him. He backed all that up on the biggest stage. You can take a wild guess at what Luka told the Frenchman there. According to him, he spoke in Slovenian, but it does not matter. Whether it was Slovenian, English, or even French, it was not pretty, and it gave us one of the great playoff moments in recent NBA history. Luka Doncic is a killer, one of the few we have in today's NBA. Trash talking to him is one of the worst things you could do. You are just turning the best player in the league into an extremely motivated and conceited of the best player in the league. No matter if you are a player, coach, or analyst, he will remember you and eventually get back to you to remind you that Luka Doncic always fights back.